Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee and Compete, the show about the news, gossip, and tactics of competitive business strategy. I'm your host, Adam McQueen. Hunter's not with me today. He's actually on the road petitioning right now to replace pepper and make salt and saffron the mandatory spices across every restaurant in all 50 states. But in the meantime, we have a community recording from our Power Half Hour with John Itkin and Clara Smith on how to be in the competitor's mindset. John is a killer product marketing and messaging expert. And Clara, if you don't know her already, you've been living under a rock. She is one of the competitive consultants at Klue that helps a ton of our customers stand up, nail, and even improve their competitive programs. So they did a tight 30 minutes with our community. If you haven't done the Power Half Hour before, come hang out every month for 30 minutes on a Friday. We chat about a topic like this, we bring in some experts, and we field a ton of questions from the audience as well. Without further ado, let me kick this over to Clara and John.
I'm really excited to be joined today by John Itkin. John, why don't you do a quick recap and then we can jump into what we have today.
Hi, everybody. John here. I help B2B companies, almost exclusively tech companies or sophisticated tech-enabled services with positioning, messaging, and sort of big questions around the brands we create, around our products, around our companies, the messages that we use to present ourselves to our markets, and the underlying thinking around how we position our products, our portfolios, our companies. That's a big topic of discussion today, and Clara and I have been having a lot of fun making some slides. So Clara, I'll let you jump on that, but we're excited to share and talk and take questions.
Thanks so much, John. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. Hi, everybody. Clara Smith here, Director of Competitive Services at Klue, which basically means I get to geek out with the best customers and their competitive programming each and every day. So I have a unique lens into how hundreds of companies are running their compete programs. And today, just like John said, we're going to be talking about framing the market for your buyer, right? We're not going to be talking about general differentiation. We're not going to be talking about battlecards. We're going to be talking about how to win one more deal when you frame the market with a buyer-centric approach. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and we're going to jump into our deck today. But know that this is not another presentation. This is actually for you, and we'll be responding live to your questions. So please feel free to put your questions in chat so we can improv and riff live. John and I are masters at that, and we're really excited to jump in with this and showcase the value of framing the market for your buyer. And for context, this is brought to you by the Coffee and Compete podcast. So if you haven't heard of Coffee and Compete, definitely go nerd out. It's an analysis of what's going on in the market each and every day. It's a lot of fun. We have special guests from all across the industry. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in, John, today. So who's who? We did quick intros. This is John and myself. Klue's marketing team did an amazing job of making us look great on a Friday morning after a weary week. But most importantly, I've been doing Compete for over 12 years in the industry, and I get to have an understanding of how the best customers are doing it. John's the founder of In the Kitchen. He's a master at messaging and consulting for some of the hottest brands in the world. And then the magic factor is actually you. So please feel free to ask questions and invest in your personal development to make the most of our 30 minutes today. So John, any quick comments before we jump into our content today?
Enough of this preamble stuff.
Enough of this preamble stuff. I love it. You're like, all right, Clara, marketing spiel over. Let's go ahead and jump in. I love it. All right. So over to you, John. Today, we're going to be nerding out about framing the market to educate your buyers, classifying competitors with your own point of view, POV, because of your view that you have internally. And then how does this influence your competitive narrative and go to market?
Awesome. So I don't know about you, but when I go and talk to founders and leaders and sort of seasoned tech product people, I hear one of two things, almost every single time. The first thing I hear quite a bit is, we don't have any competitors. So people will believe that because the the unique combination of functionality and the distinctive way that they pulled stuff together, and the kind of the way things integrate, and exactly the jobs to be done, sort of it fulfills, are sort of in a very special snowflake, and nobody else, literally no one is competing with us. That's something I hear.
I'm going to call BS on that, John. That's total BS.
Well, this is just something I hear. I've heard people say this. Smart people, okay? The other thing I hear is a billion, million, 11 billion, jillion competitors. And then they'll be like, the product team compiled a itemized list of all these competitors, and based on the product area, the functional area of the product or the feature, or and it's just sort of like, oh my God, you're like overwhelmed by all these competitors, and it's really like very scary, right? You're sort of you're hit with this wall of information, and it feels like, how can we possibly keep up with all this? This is if this is really true, like, I guess we should just cancel sleep, because we got to keep up with all these competitors. And so the reality is that I think neither of these points of view on competition are healthy. And what we really want to achieve is like a balanced point of view that is honest and has integrity and is truthful, but also useful. So we want to have framings that help us as the team trying to figure stuff out, help us actually conceive of what's going around us in a useful way that we can make sense of, such that we are not just overwhelmed and lost and just disconnected from the sort of fact pattern that we're dealing with, because we lose our sense of where we are. That's not good. That's the overwhelming one. But also we want to be honest. And so I think there's two major things that we should probably do to help us achieve this balanced point of view. And the first one is, instead of just starting with us, me, and our competitors, that's our view of the world, what if we just simply thought about our buyer first and their decision? So your buyers, it's easy to assume that your buyers are maintaining they need to go buy this kind of software or that kind of software, and they have a list going, and they're going to go and fill up a giant list. What if we just said, they're trying to make a decision. They're trying to decide what to do. And that is actually a very powerful reframing device that helps us simplify our concept of who the competition is, which we'll get into.
Totally. John, I'm going to interrupt you real quick with a hot take. Yeah, I think you're on a roll here. And most importantly, when we think about that massive chart of thousands and thousands of logos, your buyer is just as equally confused, right? And in their head, they might have their top, competitors or their top vendors that they want to go with. And so the time that they have with you is so valuable, because you have the opportunity to reframe their decision. You have the opportunity to educate them alongside their decision and their buyer journey. So John, I know you're going to speak a little bit more about this, but to your point, like, the most important thing about what you can do about that is actually consistently make a classification system for monitoring competitors internally. Over to you, John.
Yeah. And this is sort of the second piece of this. So it's not just, in a perfect world, okay, we would only ever worry about our buyers, and we like really monitor how they make decisions, and that's how we think of competition. I mean, that's just probably not quite enough. I think you do, and Claire is going to have a lot to say about this, need to maintain a consistent classification system, which is basically a set of sort of defined categories that you can put different competitors into that makes sense given who you are, what you're doing, your strategy, and your sort of view on the world. It's a framework that you can return to and refine and change, but ultimately allows you to just sort of not over rotate on any single competitor, which is one of the major downfalls that people get into.
Yeah, John, I'm very curious about your take. There's this misnomer and phrase I've heard on LinkedIn all the time. And I've also been selfishly, somebody who said it in the past, which is, are you customer obsessed? Are you competitor obsessed? Which one comes first, right? Are you customer obsessed and competitor aware, or are you competitive obsessed and customer aware? So I'm curious about what your take on it, because I have an evolved take on that as well.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, I would say obsess over the customer, but be aware of the competitors. Like that would be my suggestion right now. And you use your customer obsession as a lens. That's what I'm saying here, for which to view competitors, which can like simplify things. I mean, I'll tell you a story. Okay, very short story. I'm in a conference room with an HR tech like leadership team, and like it's a very specific piece of technology, and like, okay, who's the, like, we start by like, they tell me stuff before we begin. I'm like, okay, there's this list of competitors, put it up on the whiteboard. And we start by just having a simple conversation. Who's your buyer? What are they trying to do? And then what are their alternatives for doing this? And they're like, well, definitely not the competitors. It's actually pretty much Excel and consulting companies. So basically, in about 5 minutes of just asking simple questions, we've reframed their entire concept of who their competitive set was, from a bunch of little tech companies who collectively have about 0.001% market share, to the consultants in Excel who have 99% market share, but we're not actually on their mind. So that's just something that we'll get more into, but that's just like something you can do. You can do that. You can have that conversation.
You can do that whiteboarding. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one thing to add, John, if you don't mind. Yeah, before we continue. But yeah, around the HR tech piece, or even highly consolidated and highly saturated markets, when we think about where we want to lead, we want to lead our customers, but we also want to stay humble, and we want to be cadenced with their input and their insight. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But for me, it's like, we want to make sure if we're totally focused on the competitors, we're not at the cutting edge of where we're going as a company, and we're not necessarily delivering that X factor to our customers because we're obsessed about checking the boxes competitively. And so that's really a unique piece. And I think AI definitely plays a huge role in that, around how can we not just be another AI company, but, for example, figure out what are the workflows that we can optimize for our customers. How do we really prove that they can get off of Excel sheets with whatever it factor you have? All right, John, I know you have an example here. Let's keep jumping in here.
Yeah. So I'm going to start to get sort of concrete, and we'll get down to an example in a sec. But this point I keep making here, like, it's hard to buy software. It's hard to figure out what you should do, and what's actually happening in the market. A lot, you hear this a lot, is people are getting paralyzed and not making decisions, or they're making decisions and then unmaking decisions because it's just overwhelming. And there's an interesting book by Matthew Dixon, who wrote Challenger Sale, called Jolt Effect, which really gets into this. I highly recommend it. Very interesting book. So when you start to reframe this idea that I'm getting at here, it's you sort of change this idea of what it means to be a buyer and seller a little bit. And you just look at the buyer as, this is a person who has a problem and they're trying to decide what to do. What should I do? I have this thing. What should I do? Not what should I buy? What should I do? The seller is now someone who says, instead of the same shit you've heard 100 times where I list my features at you, I'm just going to be an expert, and I'm going to help you understand your options and lend my expertise to you so you can make the best choice. And that can change the tone. If we take that approach, it changes the tone of our pitches, of our material, how we enable, what we talk about. It really does change. So when I say this stuff, I'm getting at a really simple cadence. You could even imagine this as like an outline of a deck you're creating, or like for your first call deck. So your first call deck is starting by saying, hey, let's have a conversation of the problem to be solved, and define it really well. You don't need a slide. You could just ask the buyer about it. But obviously you want to take a thought leadership position and help these people understand their problem in language that they might not have had before. If you can do that, you are an educator who's a you're helping them. You're helping, oh my God, you're helping me think this through. That's it. I totally agree. I haven't heard it said that way, but that's the best way I've heard anybody describe what I'm going through right now. So thing one, define the problem. Thing two is say, okay, you have a problem. You probably want to solve it. Let's frame the alternatives that you have. That's what this thing is going to be about. Frame the alternatives you have to solve that problem in a way that is useful, comprehensible, understandable. Let's help you understand your alternatives. Let's help you understand what you're looking at. And the third piece of how we do this is then we want to put our product in the picture, obviously to our advantage. So we're not just being so generous where we're just I'm just a free analyst and I'm an industry analyst here to help you. No, obviously not. We're here to say, if we frame the alternatives based on this very smart, sharp, insightful framing, and then we put our product in the picture, we're obviously teaching them that we're better. We're teaching our buyer that we are indeed the best choice for them because we're connecting back to the problem which we so thoughtfully articulated.
Definitely. And John, I see this almost as a flywheel here, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I haven't thought about it that way, but absolutely.
And when we think about actually redefining the problem and staying fresh with the problem and making sure that the problem is evolving with the market, we need to get product feedback and we need to get workflow feedback and we need to get user feedback, right? So in no way do I see this as a static one and done. Let's create a one, sales deck that you'll use for a year. The alternatives are changing almost every day, but I do think the, build versus buy, manual versus invest in a solution, these are going to be forever type motions. And then one of the alternatives that I see these days is why can't you just hack it with AI, right? And so if you have a better understanding of the problem for the buyer, then you can walk them through this journey. And then with that continuous improvement, you can stay fresh and stay on the cutting edge of that. John, are you game for one question? We had something come through from Chloe.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. What are the best tips for building a first call disco sales deck when framing the competitive landscape and market trends that are impacting the old way versus the new way?
So old way, new way is a very particular way of getting into this. So if I look at these three boxes here, we want to frame it as old way, new way, is a little tricky just because old way, new way is often a lot of times about sort of selling a category, right? Old way, new way is a major technique for sort of launching trying to do a category creation narrative. This kind of is a little bit more hard boiled competitive way of selling into an existing category. But let's come back to that.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So open question, how do you frame the alternative? So John and I have an example that we'll continue to riff on here. Riff is my word of the day. So we're going to jump into what's best for growth ready HR generalists. John, take it away here.
Yeah, right. So it's this is sort of getting into, this is an example. So this is an idea of a completely made up sales deck slide that we could use if we were the HR platform Gusto, which I figure most of y'all have heard of. And so let me just do a little redux of what's going on this slide. So there's a headline here. It says, what's best for growth ready HR generalists? So I'm already assuming that I've framed the problem that there are HR generalists at small to mid-sized companies who are really ready for growth, but are totally under-resourced to do it because they're maxed out. They're working for Gusto specializes in selling to mid-sized companies, small and mid-sized. So it's a super maxed out HR person. They're going to be a generalist. They're going to be oh my God, there's all this stuff is going on. I have to do more with less and I can't, that's the problem they're trying to solve. How do I scale good HR practices and good, so create scalable, positive employee experiences without losing my mind because I can't take on too much. And so if you're trying to figure that out, this is based on just really simple research that we did in 15 minutes. But if you're that buyer trying to figure that out, you probably have kind of two basic choices in front of you. You have either on one end of things, niche point solutions who are going to be, they have some stuff going for them. Like you could get like a really specific functionality from a company, like let's say a remote pass, which is really good at supporting remote workers. So that's what they say. Or like some of these other companies which are just basically like, I'm a really cheap, easy subscription service. But so they're niche-y, they're small, and they're point solutions. They're not big platforms. And on the other end, you might be thinking, are we ready for Workday? Are we ready for like the ADPs of the world? Those are obviously legacy platforms, been around for a long time. They're well known. They have a lot of resources. But both of those have pretty big drawbacks. So if I'm looking at this as a growth-ready HR generalist, ready for battle, ready to take my little company even bigger, and I want good resources that aren't going to make my life miserable, if I go niche point solution, if you do that, you're probably going to wind up with a very fragmented experience, or you have your employees bouncing around between one login and the next, and they can't figure out what to do. They're calling you. And then you're not going to get great support because these are not support companies. They are small. They are kind of scrappy. They're not going to have great support teams. On the other end, legacy platforms are not known for having great UX, are they? Like, I don't think anybody calls ADP a user experience company. They make crappy experiences. We all know it. We've all been there. And you're just a number. If ADP is built for companies with like 10,000 employees and you only have 450, do you really think that you're going to get good support? Obviously not. Well, Gusto is different, right? So Gusto is going to offer all-in-one, simple experience, for you and for your employees. We have a beloved UX. Everybody knows that like we do a great job creating engaging experiences that people really like. And importantly for you, Mrs. Growth Ready HR Generalist, personalized support, you're going to get real contact from real people who want to know you and care about your company. And we have the scalability to grow with you. So good for you. You grew from 200 to 400, 450. You're probably going to grow another 300 this year. You totally could. You can stay with us. And so if I do that, what I did is I just gave them an honest breakdown. You have a decision. You could go with niche point solutions. Maybe that's right for you. You could go with legacy platforms. Maybe that's great too. But because I understand your problem and I understand who you are and you're my best, you're like really right for me, I can really tell you why we're better. And so at that point, I depositioned not just the 6 names on this slide, these 6 companies, which I did, and I do think you can put other brands on your slide. I depositioned all the other ones that they might look at who fall into those categories. And I taught them a framework of how to think about their options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, John. What I see is I'm going to create a new word on the spot. It's almost a competitive ICP here. As you know where you stand within your industry, you know who you don't want to be, you know who you want to be, and you also know where you're not going as a company. And so I love the framework here, and I can see this evolving and figuring out, well, maybe we want to bust through 1,000 employees, right, John? Maybe we want to go into a different market. That's going to totally shift this slide up. And John Brown, I see your note in the comment around, is the HR generalist the buyer in this example versus key stakeholder or or executive sponsor or whatever the case is. And I can see this slide being changed per persona, right? I can see the customization happening so you can give them a champion deck to win this internally. And just for context here, John actually created this to be customer facing. So this is like what the seller is presenting competitively to the buyer. All right. So just like John was talking about, what I've seen throughout the customers that I've supported is that there's a variety of different ways that you can do competitor type bucketing or competitor prioritization or competitor tiering. And I want to share with everybody a couple ways to look at your competitors, most importantly, so it can actually back into your calendar. Like this is a theoretical exercise to do, but it really hits your bottom line and it really hits your day-to-day when you own what's your SLA actually per each of these bucket types. So one of these types is the revenue threat. Who's literally eating your lunch and who are you losing to? Are you on this side of the spectrum, like John said, or are you on the other side of the spectrum? And the need here is to win more deals, right? When you put those competitors in your revenue threat bucket, these are what your board is going to be asking about. This is where you're going to be on the back foot around. The second one is a product or AI threat. Which products are leading in the market that maybe your product teams are gaining inspiration from? Maybe your customers aren't looking at them, but they're that itty bitty type customer where you're like, they're doing some really cool stuff. And this is where we want to lead the market around. And so you need insights for roadmap to accelerate velocity. And then the last one is like an M&A opportunity. Which companies would augment yours, but maybe is not impacting revenue? What would be that it factor there? And I think the elephant in the room here is that a lot of competitors are actually throughout multiple buckets here, right? So it's not a perfect pure play bucketing system, but the elephant in the room is how much time do you really have though? And so I wanted to showcase a quick matrix that I've built out and consulted across a lot of companies around in terms of how do you tier your competitors based on revenue, based on the bottom line that you've lost, and literally what does that deliverable look like, right? How much time are you spending per week or per month for dedicated battle card updates, newsletter coverage, monthly metrics monitoring, executive reports, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have different tiering around a focus resource for tier 2. You have your TLDR for ankle biter competitors. And then you have your on special request only for executive type requests. And so this has been really helpful to not only create it theoretically, to make sure that this actually hits in terms of an SLA back to your company. So going to just close out and say that in terms of your competitor tiering, in terms of that slide that John showed, in terms of the buckets, there is a cadence validation that's worth going through a couple of these motions of win-loss insights, conversational intelligence recordings, CAPS, analyst briefings, internal POV. So you have these inputs to actually do an interlock once a quarter to understand how has this changed? What's a tier 1? What's a tier 2? And how does that actually hit my calendar? So I'm going to pause, John. What's your final thoughts around this? And then we have 2 more questions in the chat.
Sure. I think this is, let's just go over the questions. We only have a minute. And
I know, this is so tough. We need more time.
To Chloe, because it's bothering me. My 10-second answer to Chloe is on my Gusto slide there. You would have old way on one side and we're the new way. So basically you just frame the alternatives as we're choosing between an old way and a new way, which is a pretty specific way of framing alternatives. That's all. So, but if it's true, it's true, right? So don't, you know what I mean? If that's how your buyers think, and that's what the truth of your situation, great. Just frame it old way over here, new way, us over there.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can also add in what we've heard from customers like you, right? What is your profile type and what have we heard from customers like you? We have one last question from David that we're going to slide in right before the end of our time today. Any tips on how you can get a sense for the problem prior to the discovery call so you can best frame it? Loaded question here, John.
Yes, qualitative research. So you just go and have your do actually upstream research so you kind of have a feel for it. Institutional knowledge from downloading what your sellers and market-facing folks are experiencing, common sense research.
Absolutely. And look at all their online presence and profiles and all the different lead gen sources that you see in terms of what they're downloading, what they're doing on a daily basis, what's coming up in ChatGPT as their competitors, right? You could do some interesting prospecting around that. Just want to thank everybody for their time, for investing in their professional development. Me and John are always open for coffee chats. We actually met over a cold prospecting coffee chat that I sent to him. So he's very open to getting to know people. Thank you, John, so much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for attending today.
Really appreciate it. Great questions.
Have a great weekend, everybody.